Hello, welcome to the July edition of your Commissioner's Corner show. I'm your host, Scott Vargo, Summit County Manager, and I'm joined by all three county commissioners and one microphone, Karin Stiegelmeyer, Dan Gibbs, and Thomas Davidson. So there'll probably be some point in the segment today where Thomas is talking and Karin is holding the microphone, and you won't be able to hear him, but that's the way we roll. So we want to start off really and spend most of the show today talking about fire restrictions, fire hazards, mitigation efforts, variety of things that are going on within Summit County as a number of fires have picked up steam throughout the state, and of course we have been impacted by some fire here locally as well. So Karin, I'll turn it over to you since you have the microphone. You want to talk a little bit about Buffalo Fire, which in our quick review here we just figured out started on June the 12th. And today is July the 9th, and so we're almost a month past the start of that fire. You want to talk a little bit about what happened?
Sure. I think this was a great, real exercise. Ironically, we were planning an emergency exercise very similar to this fire, and we had the real thing instead. Mm-hmm. And so I think there were a lot of lessons learned. And you can talk to people about their evacuation stories and what they figured out they should have done better in terms of planning for that evacuation. That's something that everyone should think about. I was up there hiking yesterday because the Buffalo Cabin Trail is on one side of the fire, and the fire does go over that trail in a few places, but it is open now. It was closed for quite a while. And the firefighters were in there cutting trees to make it safe because the fire is pretty much out. We think there could be hot spots, but in having the fire go through, there are a lot of trees that could fall. And so there's been a lot of cutting just for safety. And so that trail is open. The request is to stay on the trail. Don't get off the trail for your safety. It is quite interesting to see the spottiness of the fire. I have a beautiful picture of blackened logs with beautiful lupin flowers blooming right next to it. It's really pretty interesting, and then pretty exciting to see bright orange-red logs and forest from all that retardant. But there are a couple other trails that are still closed in that burn area. So I would recommend exploring the Buffalo Cabin Trail just to get a look at it and do some planning for the next fire because we know there will be more. Yep.
Dan, you want to talk a little bit about why the efforts to put that fire out or to save those homes were so successful?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I think luck was on our side a little bit this year, just like last year. However, there was a tremendous amount of work that was done over the last years on working on the U.S. Forest Service component within the Mesa Cortina and wilderness areas. They had a very unique prescription to put together fire breaks on the, I guess, western end of those neighborhoods. And a few years ago, they worked with the Colorado State Forest Service too. Paul Cada was our regional person that really worked closely with homeowners to look at what resources can we do while the Forest Service works on forested lands within the federal area, and then Paul and the county could work with private landowners to do defensible space. And so, and then Paul Cada and the county also worked with the Metro District up there as well. So you really had cross-boundary work going on the federal land and private, as well as the Metro District land too, where there was thinning around where the water cistern is up there. And so that whole project was cost about $1 million, and we know now that the value of the properties that were saved reach up to almost $1 billion. So it's money well spent, to say the least. And I know that some of the homeowners up there originally were not very supportive of this project of the thinning, but I've had numerous people reach out to me via telephone and email saying, hey, we are grateful of the work that the U.S. Forest Service did, the state, the county, all working together to do some defensible space. And I personally feel, and I think it's safe to say we all feel, that made a huge impact. I mean, there are 2,600 units of homes just within the wilderness area, and then you have the Mesa Cortina part as well. So I'd say we're lucky, but we planned right for it as well. So, the winds were shifting around a little bit, but if they were going ahead straight into the neighborhood, like originally what was going on, that's tough to fight.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and again, having those fire breaks allowed for a safe place for the firefighters to operate out of, and it allowed the time necessary to be able to call the air resources in and to be able to drop retardant on that edge of the fire. And again, I think short of those fire breaks that we would probably be involved in a very different conversation right now.
Yes. Yeah. And the partnership involved with we have Engine 607 that's based up in the Wilderness Station, where they have an agreement with Summit Fire and EMS. I think that's very unique. So they were part of the initial attack crew with Summit Fire and Rescue and EMS, as well as Red, White, and Blue, and other partners around surrounding county. We had folks that came down from Grand County, folks that came up from Park County, folks that came over all angles from Eagle County as well, and that made a huge difference as well.
Yep. Thomas, you want to talk a little bit about the chipping and the grant programs?
Sure. So, we started the chipping program now 4 years ago or 5 years ago? Fifth year, right? And this is a program where we come around every summer. If you go onto our county website and pull up the chipping program, you'll see the schedule. And whatever woody matter you've got that you need to get rid of, that's basically what this chipping program is all about. And it's interesting, as we've done this, we thought that we would see the use of this program drop off, and anything but. So it's one of the more important ways that we're helping every neighborhood in the county do the right thing with regards to being wise about protecting their home from fire. And then, one other thing that's really important to mention in terms of, the fuel break that saved Wilderness, because it's simply the truth. The hotshots that came in said, "Oh, it made all the difference," right? We have how many of those projects out there approved through NEPA, but still not done?
At least 15.
Right? So in any case, there's a lot more work that we need to continue to do with regards to fuel breaks and protecting residential areas within Summit County.
And we suspect that some of the opposition or concerns that have been raised in years past about doing those sorts of projects, with the activity that happened at Peak 2 last year and then with Buffalo Fire this year, and seeing the success of those efforts, we expect to see far more support locally for those types of projects going forward.
Right. We do get some funding from Denver Water for those sorts of projects, but if we really want to get the rest of those projects done, we're going to have to figure out a way to fund that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. Karin, do you want to talk a little bit about the fire restrictions that are in place now?
Sure. We are in stage 2 fire restrictions, and I think most people know that. There are signs up on the highways, and the bit that people know is no fireworks. That's well publicized, and people know no open fires, but then it gets a little more technical after that. We started with stage 1 fire restrictions, and then we went to stage 2. Stage 2 is much more restrictive, and so that includes no charcoal grilling, because that's sparks that can easily start a fire. Cigarette smoking, cigar smoking, any kind of smoking is not allowed unless you're indoors. And let's see, what am I leaving out? there probably are some other restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference between stage 1 and stage 2 is in stage 1 restrictions, people are allowed to have campfires in designated camping, supervised campground areas. And in stage 2, all of those campfires are prohibited. I don't know, fireworks is prohibited in both. There's use of chainsaws and welding devices and those kinds of things. Those are all restricted or banned within stage 2 restrictions.
For camp stoves?
The camp stoves that are that have a shutoff valve, and you have at least a 3-foot space surrounding that grill where there's no combustible material, then that would be allowed. But even having a camp stove, if you're just setting it on the forest floor, that is not allowed in stage 2 restrictions. We're going to work with the commissioners, so we have a work session and a regular meeting tomorrow on the 10th of July. We'll be working with you guys on some modifications to the stage 2 restrictions to allow for exemptions at the sheriff's discretion. So as an example, in years past when we've done this and gotten to stage 2, we happen to be tied to a state fire restriction as well. That state restriction had some exemptions or a process for exemptions. This year, when we adopted stage 2, there was no government or state governor's order around restrictions statewide, so we didn't catch that piece. And so we're going to insert or suggest that we insert some exemption language that would allow for, we've had some requests from people that are contractors that are working on a house project or a commercial project somewhere, and they may be doing welding activities. In certain circumstances, that may be allowed, and so this will at least give those folks the opportunity to make a request for it. So that'll be coming for you guys as well. And the other thing that we're looking at is trying to work with the towns a little more closely around fire restrictions, because there are some differences between what the county has adopted in unincorporated Summit County, what the Forest Service has adopted in the National Forest, and then what each individual town jurisdiction has adopted. And I've gotten the question and the comment from multiple people, why doesn't the county just adopt something that's countywide? And we don't have the authority to adopt this sort of a regulation in the towns, in the incorporated areas within Summit County. And so one of the biggest areas that has been of confusion for folks has been the smoking restriction. And so no smoking outdoors in unincorporated Summit County. That also applies in the Forest Service property and in several towns. But some of the other towns don't have that same restriction. And so trying to work with the towns to get everybody on the same page, or at least get some of the language very similar, because again, it's just confusing for people that live here, and it's very confusing for people that are coming to visit and not knowing where are they actually. Are they in unincorporated Summit County? Are they in the town of Frisco, wherever they might be? And so trying to do some coordination around that.
Yeah, we worked really hard to be as consistent as possible. It is a problem all around the state because the way it works, individual jurisdictions, whether it's a town, a county, a national forest, a fire district, they all have authority to have their own fire restrictions. And we have worked hard to actually be consistent with our fire departments, with the National Forest, but we still have a little more work to do.
Yep. Dan, you want to talk? Oh, go ahead.
One other area I just want to make sure people know too, the shooting range too is closed. We had a major fire that started up in the basalt eligible area as a result of tracer rounds being fired in that particular area, and that fire is a really challenging fire where there's 550 firefighters. It's grown to I believe a few thousand acres. It's quite large. So that's another FYI. No shooting firearms. Whether it's at our shooting range or in the backcountry, anywhere in the forest.
Good clarification. Dan, you want to talk about the Ranger program and the Sheriff's Office program that we've implemented this year and are getting support from the towns and the fire districts?
Yeah, we, Summit County, as I think most people are aware, we're about 80% federal lands. the budget for the U.S. Forest Service, in particular for our neck of the woods, has been dramatically decreasing over the last few years. They went from a budget in 2008 with $33 million, and the budget this year, 2018, is at $12 million. And so we have fairly every other month or so meetings with leadership from the U.S. Forest Service, and we were trying to figure out how we can partner and look at providing, you know, more enhanced services with dealing with unattended campfires and just people on the ground that can help educate, as well as people that have the authority to write tickets for you know, unattended campfires and so forth. So Forest Service really just didn't have funding for that. So the county teamed up with all the towns in Summit County, as well as the fire districts as well. And we have funded 4 full-time seasonal employees that are more or less U.S. Forest Service employees that we're helping to fund. And their job is to, you know, hike on the camping trails and to really be actively, you know, writing tickets and educating people on wildfire awareness and so forth. And they've already been writing tickets, and they've already noticed, you know, numerous unattended campfires. And so I'm really happy that we're partnering with you know, all those partners, U.S. Forest Service, the towns, and the fire district. And hopefully this will be meaningful to, you know, be aware and to help put fires out right away, and hopefully they don't exist in the first place. So.
Yeah, and so between the Forest Service and the Sheriff's Office that are doing some overtime patrols in a similar way, they've identified over a dozen unattended campfires in the first 3 weeks that they were on the ground. And so again, that it's shocking, I think, to many of us locals that are here that people would have a fire going in a pit and would walk away and leave that fire unattended, especially as you see the conditions around Summit County and the amount of and how dry it is. And despite that, people are still doing that. And so it's great that we've got that resource out there that's finding those, putting them out properly, trying to find the folks that left them, and ticketing them appropriately as well. The sheriff mentioned to me that they've had a number of folks that have been violating the fire ban. I think there were half a dozen of them, or fire restrictions, and they've ticketed them or talked to them and ticketed them, and been told by several of them that they knew all about the restrictions and knew that they weren't supposed to have a fire, but still were having a fire anyway. And so again, it's important to have people on the ground that are doing some of the enforcement activities. And so having those rangers out there for the Forest Service and having the Sheriff's Office doing some patrolling is a great benefit to the community.
Yeah, and you know, helping to get the word out has been Colorado Department of Transportation too. They've been great at using the variable message boards that you see coming up from Denver, as well as coming from the Vail side as well. There's some pretty pronounced signage, but yeah, that's very unfortunate to hear. Wildfires, as everyone should know, it's scary as anything, and just talk to folks that live in Mesa Cortina, Wilderness, or Peak 7 neighborhood from last year, and they'll tell you it's unpredictable. We know that embers can travel a mile in a distance, so just because a fire could be a mile away doesn't make you any safer necessarily. So we all as a community need to come together and be aware and be vigilant. And if you see people with unattended campfires or just any campfire right now and breaking these stage 2 fire bans, call 911.
Yep, absolutely. Thomas, you want to talk about SC Alert and some of the messaging alert systems that we've got?
Yeah, so there's a push right now by Summit County government to get people to sign up for SC Alert. And that is our way of being able to communicate with your cell phone or with your email in order to get notices out in the event that we've got something going on and need to communicate to folks about some sort of an emergency. And we're doing a bunch of different innovative things. I think one of the funner things is the coasters that we've distributed to a number of the bars. So when you pick that drink up, there's a little coaster that's telling you about how to sign up for SC Alert. And it's working. I talked with Julie Suter earlier today, and we're getting good subscription rates, right, in terms of SC Alert. But that is absolutely a must. It's easy to do. It's scalert.org.
Yeah,
right?
just go to the county's website, and
Go
then
to the county website and you'll find it.
that will get you linked directly to the appropriate site. And so just go to Summit County's website, type in SC Alert, and it will bring you to that button. I think there's a sign up button on the very main page, the home page of the county website.
Yeah. But certainly we understand it's our responsibility to have ways to communicate to people in real time with regards to some of the kinds of emergencies that we could have. So yeah, we're pleased with that so far, and we'll continue those efforts. We'll try to make sure that people know how to get information in real time when something really bad is happening and we need to communicate to people quickly about what to do.
And Karin, last item that we wanted to cover is yours. So you need the microphone. So obviously when you have a fire, you have a burn area, you have a big scar on the landscape, you have things being regenerated. You don't necessarily want noxious weeds. So this is a segue for you to talk about noxious weeds.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes, my
Scott.
pleasure, my pleasure.
Well, I think it's a perfect time when you're doing your chipping program piles, getting all those lower branches and any woody material out of your private property. Also be on the lookout for the noxious weeds that will come in. And by the way, they grow quickly and produce all this fuel that can catch on fire. So there's another link.
Yeah.
But we have a great weed department here. Our weed department has taken over contracts for CDOT and others because they're very efficient, and they have really good materials. You can just go on the website again to the weed department and you can see pictures. Sometimes it's a little confusing to tell which daisy is that noxious, horrible one, like the false chamomile or the oxeye daisy. Both have taken over acres and acres and destroy wildlife habitat in Colorado. So if you're unsure, our weed department also has booklets that help you identify, and they also have backpack sprayers so that if you don't want to deal with figuring out the right herbicide to use, they have it down to a fine art, and you can pick up the backpack sprayer and walk around a pretty large property and be able to get rid of the thistles, the daisies that are noxious, horrible weeds. And we've come a long way in Summit County with our weeds. And so thank you all for doing your part.
And the folks at the weed department will give you a little training on the backpack sprayer as well when you pick it up, so you know how to spray and how to use the system itself. So take advantage of that. So thanks to everybody for watching. We're doing a bit of an abbreviated show today. The high school studio is part of the giant construction project that's going on at the high school. So we're in temporary quarters here in the county's BOCC room. So thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for other great SCTV programming.